She spent her daughter's entire college fund on a house. And honestly, she has zero regrets. What would you do if your own child called another woman mom, the same woman who destroyed your marriage? Because one mother found out exactly what she was capable of when pushed past her breaking point. And the answer shocked everyone, including herself. Let me set the scene for you. Her name is Danielle. 44 years old, hardworking, the kind of woman who quietly holds everything together while everyone around her takes that for granted. For 20 years, she built a life with her husband Jonathan. Date nights that turned into routines, holidays that blurred into one another, the comfortable, predictable rhythm of a long marriage. They had a daughter together, Mia, who was 18 and on the edge of the biggest milestone of her young life, college. Danielle had been preparing for that moment for years, not just emotionally, financially. She had been tucking money away, dollar by dollar, into a dedicated college fund. She and Jonathan had an agreement. They'd each save their half separately, and together they'd cover Mia's education. That money was sacred, off limits, the kind of fund you don't touch no matter what, because it represents something bigger than you. It represents your child's future. And then Jonathan blew up the whole thing. Not the fund, not yet, something worse. About 2 months before Mia was supposed to leave for college, Jonathan sat Danielle down and told her the truth. He had been having an affair for almost an entire year with his secretary Alicia, who was 34 years old, a full decade younger, a woman who had been smiling at Danielle at company events, probably while texting her husband under the table. Now, here's where a lot of women might have screamed, thrown things, begged for answers. Danielle didn't. She went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. She filed for divorce almost immediately, packed what she needed, and moved in with a friend. No dramatic goodbye, no tearful scene in the driveway. She just left. And she waited for her daughter to reach out, because surely, Mia would call, would text, would ask where her mother was, whether she was okay, whether she needed anything. Danielle had just had the floor ripped out from under her entire life. She was sleeping in a guest room at a friend's house after 20 years of marriage. The least she expected was a, "Mom, are you okay?" The text never came. After almost a week of silence, Danielle was the one who reached out first. She sent Mia a message explaining what had happened, the affair, the divorce, all of it. And Mia's response? She already knew. Jonathan had gotten to her first, and rather than express grief or outrage or even basic sympathy for her mother, Mia said she wasn't really bothered by it, that it didn't really involve her, didn't involve her. Let that sink in for a second. Your parents' marriage falls apart because your dad cheated for a year, your mom is essentially homeless, and your reaction is a shrug? Danielle tried not to read too much into it at first. She told herself Mia was processing, that teenagers shut down when they're overwhelmed. She kept reaching out, kept suggesting they spend time together, kept showing up even when it was inconvenient, even when her own life was in free fall. And Mia would occasionally agree to meet up, but when they did, she was checked out, barely looked up from her phone, gave one word answers. It was like having lunch with a stranger who happened to share your DNA. Then the messages stopped altogether. Mia went completely silent on her mother for weeks. Danielle told herself it was a phase, that Mia needed space, that love sometimes means giving people room to figure things out. She held on to hope the way you hold onto something in a current, white knuckled, exhausted, trying not to be swept away. And then she saw the Instagram post. It was a photo of Mia and Alicia, the secretary, the affair partner, the woman who had been sleeping with Jonathan for a year while Danielle was right there, living her life, trusting her husband. In the photo, Mia was smiling, arms wrapped around Alicia like they'd known each other forever. And the caption? She called Alicia Mom, with a little heart emoji. Danielle lost it. And honestly, who could blame her? She called Mia. Once, no answer. Twice, nothing. By the 17th call, yes, 17, Mia finally picked up, sounding irritated, like her mother was some inconvenient notification she'd been dismissing. Danielle demanded to know what that post was about. Mia told her it was none of her business, that her profile was public, and Danielle shouldn't be spying on her. Spying on your own mother, who you're publicly calling someone else. The call ended with Mia blocking Danielle entirely. And in the silence that followed, sitting alone, blocked by her own child, in the middle of a divorce she didn't ask for, something shifted inside Danielle. Something that had been bending for months finally snapped. She opened her banking app. She looked at the college fund, and she made a decision that would change everything. Stay with me, because what she does next is either the most justified thing you've ever heard or the most devastating. And by the end of this story, you might not be sure which one it is. There's a house Danielle had been eyeing for years, not in a casual, oh, that's pretty kind of way, in a deep, aching, this is the life I wanted kind of way. It was in a great neighborhood, the kind of street where you can hear kids playing outside in the summer and neighbors actually wave at each other. She'd driven past it more times than she'd like to admit. But it was never the right time. Jonathan didn't want to move. Mia didn't want to leave her friends, so Danielle did what she always did. She pushed her own wants aside and kept the peace. But now, Jonathan was gone. Mia had chosen her side, and it wasn't Danielle's. The peace she'd sacrificed so much to maintain had shattered anyway, so she called the real estate agent. She took every dollar from Mia's college fund, the money she had been saving for years, the money that was supposed to be untouchable, added a little extra from her personal savings, and she bought that house, signed the papers, made it hers. And when she got the keys, she did something that felt almost rebellious in its simplicity. She took a photo and posted it on social media, not with a long caption, not with an explanation, just a photo of her new home, a quiet, visual announcement that said, I am still here, I am moving forward, and I am done shrinking. She didn't even think about who might see it, but someone always does. Within days, one of Jonathan's relatives spotted the post and forwarded it to him, and Jonathan, the man who had cheated on her for a year, who had invited his affair partner to move into their family home almost before the ink was dry on the separation, called Danielle, furious. He wanted to know how she could afford a house like that. Last time they'd talked finances, it had been out of her reach. Danielle didn't sugarcoat it. She told him exactly where the money came from, the college fund. The silence on the other end of that call must have been something. And then Jonathan exploded. He called her irresponsible. He said she had no right to touch that money. He accused her of being petty, jealous, vindictive, said she was punishing Mia simply because Mia had a decent relationship with Alicia. He acted like he was the reasonable one, like he was the wronged party, like he hadn't spent a year lying to his wife and building a secret second life with another woman. Danielle listened to every word, and then she said what she'd been thinking for months. She has other people taking care of her now. She made that very clear. Then she hung up. But Jonathan wasn't the last call she'd get that day. About an hour later, Mia called. And she wasn't cold or dismissive this time. She was wrecked. Danielle could barely understand her through the crying, the gasping, ugly kind of crying that you can't fake and can't really control. Mia kept asking the same question over and over. How could you do this to me? I always put you first. Danielle let the words hang there for a moment before she responded. Did you put me first when you blocked me? Did you put me first when you called Alicia your mom? Did you put me first when you couldn't even text me to ask if I was okay? Mia's defense was that the post meant nothing, that calling Alicia mom was just a sweet gesture, a way to help Alicia feel more welcome in the family, more comfortable in this new blended situation that Mia was trying to navigate. She said she wasn't trying to replace Danielle. She said she was just trying to balance things, keep the peace with her dad, not lose anyone. And here's the heartbreaking part: Danielle actually understood that logic. She knew what it felt like to want to keep everyone happy. She'd spent 20 years doing exactly that. But understanding someone's reasoning doesn't mean you have to be okay with the consequences. And the consequence of Mia's choices was that Danielle had been left completely alone during the worst chapter of her life. discarded by her husband, then by her daughter in favor of the same woman. That's not balance, that's betrayal. The call ended with Mia saying she never thought her own mother would take revenge on her. And something about those words hit Danielle hard, because she hadn't thought of it as revenge. She'd thought of it as finally doing something for herself. But the line between those two things, self preservation and retaliation, is thinner than we'd like to admit. When the call ended, Danielle sat with that discomfort. She didn't run from it. She let herself feel it, but the money was spent, the house was hers, and life kept moving. Over the next few weeks, Mia reached out repeatedly, every 2 days like clockwork, a text, a message, a quiet plea asking if Danielle had changed her mind. For a while, Danielle didn't respond at all. She wasn't ready. She needed the silence, but eventually she replied with something simple and final. The money is gone, and you showed me your priorities. Mia fired back that it was just a post and Danielle was overreacting, and that response, more than anything else, told Danielle everything. Because if Mia truly understood why it hurt, she wouldn't have minimized it. She would have sat in the discomfort with her mother instead of trying to logic her way out of accountability. Danielle archived the chat and went quiet. Then came the ambush. She was leaving work one afternoon, heading out to grab lunch, when she spotted Jonathan's car parked across the street. He and Mia were both leaning against the hood, arms crossed, waiting, like they'd coordinated, like they had a plan. Danielle considered walking past them entirely, but something told her this needed to end, properly, completely, once and for all. So she told them to follow her to the restaurant across the street. They sat down, and before either of them could open their mouths, Danielle spoke. She laid it all out: the affair, the year of lies, the divorce, moving out with nothing but her dignity, and then Mia, the distance, the cold shoulder, the posts, the blocking. She looked her daughter in the eye and said something she'd never said out loud before. I cannot look at you as my daughter right now, because no daughter of mine would have done what you did. The table went silent. Mia's eyes filled with tears. Danielle could see it. The moment the words landed somewhere real, somewhere deep. But she didn't stop. She said that if it had been any other woman, someone with less love and less patience, Mia would have already been cut off completely. That she should count herself lucky that Danielle was still at the table at all. Then she grabbed her food, paid the check, and walked out. She didn't look back. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't afford to fall apart in a restaurant parking lot. She had already given enough of herself away. The thing about moments like that is they change the air between people. Something was broken, but broken things can sometimes be rebuilt if both people are willing to pick up the pieces. A month passed, 30 days of silence between a mother and her daughter. No texts, no calls, no accidental run ins, just nothing. And in that nothing, Danielle did something she hadn't had the space to do in months. She breathed. She unpacked boxes in her new house. She learned which floorboards creaked and which windows caught the afternoon light just right. She made the place hers slowly, room by room. She started to feel, for the first time in a very long time, like a person who belongs somewhere. But grief has a way of sneaking up on you in the quiet moments. Late at night, she'd pull out old photo albums. Mia as a toddler, gap toothed and laughing. Mia on her first day of school, backpack almost bigger than she was. Mia at prom, rolling her eyes at the camera while secretly loving the attention. 20 years of memories. And now, in just a few weeks, Mia would be leaving for college, the very college Danielle had spent years saving for, and someone else might be the one standing in that dorm room doorway, helping her hang up her posters and make her bed. The thought of Alicia doing that, Alicia of all people, was almost too much to sit with. Danielle told herself she'd accepted it, that she was at peace. But peace and acceptance aren't always the same thing, and she knew it. Then, 3 days before Mia's move-in date, a letter arrived. Not a text, not a DM, a letter, handwritten, sealed in an envelope with Danielle's name on the front in Mia's loopy, familiar handwriting. And the moment Danielle saw it, something in her chest cracked open just a little. She sat down before she opened it. What she read inside was not a perfect apology, it wasn't polished or eloquent, it was messy and raw and full of crossed out words and sentences that started over halfway through. But it was honest, and that honesty hit harder than anything perfectly worded ever could have. Mia confessed everything. She hadn't warmed up to Alicia because she actually liked her. She hadn't chosen her father's side because she believed he was right. She had done it because Jonathan had made her a deal. If Mia was kind to Alicia, genuinely kind, publicly kind, the kind of kind that showed up in Instagram posts with heart emojis, he would buy her a car. And when she started her second year of college, he'd let her move off campus into an apartment with her friends instead of staying in the dorms. A car, an apartment. That was the price of her mother's dignity. Mia admitted she had known, even as she was doing it, that it would hurt Danielle. That's why she started pulling away, not out of genuine preference for her father, but out of guilt. She couldn't look her mother in the eye while betraying her, so she stopped looking altogether. She told herself that once she got what she wanted, once the car was hers and the apartment was secured, she'd fix things. She'd explain. She'd make it right. But time kept moving and the distance kept growing, and by the time Danielle saw that Instagram post, the damage was already done. I kept telling myself I'd fix it later, Mia wrote. But I never stopped to think that later might be too late. She ended the letter by asking, not demanding, not expecting, just asking if Danielle would consider coming to help her move into her dorm. She included the date and the time, and then she said something that Danielle had to read twice. I don't want Alicia there. I want you. Only you. Danielle put the letter down and stared at the wall for a long time. Here's the thing about being a mother that nobody really prepares you for: the love doesn't turn off, even when you want it to, even when it would be so much easier if it did. Even when the person you love has hurt you in ways you never imagined possible, the love just sits there, stubborn and unreasonable, refusing to leave. Danielle was angry. She had every right to be. Mia hadn't just been thoughtless, she had made a calculated decision to prioritize material things over her own mother's pain. That's not a small thing. That's not something you brush under the rug with a heartfelt letter and a promise to do better. But Mia was 18, and at 18, most of us are capable of spectacular selfishness without fully understanding the weight of what we're doing. That doesn't make it okay. It doesn't erase the hurt, but it does add context. And Danielle, for all the pain she'd been carrying, was self aware enough to know that she hadn't always been perfect either. The 17 calls in a row, the very public social media post about the house, the brutal speech in the restaurant, none of that was clean or simple either. Hurt people. And this family had been hurting each other in circles for months. Someone had to be the one to stop. Danielle picked up her phone. She drafted a response to Mia's letter. Not immediately, not impulsively, but carefully over the course of 2 days. She told Mia the truth, that the letter helped, but it didn't fix everything overnight. That what Mia did, trading her mother's dignity for a car, was something Danielle was going to need real time to process. That forgiveness wasn't a light switch. It was a slow, deliberate walk back towards someone, one step at a time. But she also told her daughter that she missed her, that she'd been looking at old photos, that the idea of not being there for this milestone, college move-in day, one of the biggest moments of Mia's young life, felt like a loss she wasn't willing to accept. She told Mia she would come. When Mia read it, she called immediately, and they talked for a long time, longer than they had in months. Both of them cried. The ugly, relieved kind of crying that happens when something that's been sealed too tight finally gets to breathe again. No speeches, no accusations, just two people trying to find their way back to each other through the mess they'd both made. Mia made one more request during that call. She asked her father to stay home on move in day. She didn't want Jonathan there. She didn't want Alicia there. She wanted her mom, just her mom, to be the one standing in that dorm room, helping her figure out where to put everything. Jonathan and Alicia were apparently not thrilled about this, but Mia held firm. And honestly, that firmness, that clarity about who she wanted beside her, said more than any letter could have. On move in day, Danielle showed up. She helped carry boxes. She argued gently about where the desk lamp should go. She made Mia's bed the way she always had, tucked in on the sides, extra pillow near the headboard. She met Mia's roommate and made polite small talk. She did all the ordinary, unremarkable things that parents do on move in day, and she felt every single one of them like a gift. Before she left, Mia hugged her. The kind of hug that has an apology built into it. Long, tight, neither of them pulling away first. They weren't fixed, they both knew that. There were months of hurt to work through, patterns to unlearn, trust to rebuild slowly and carefully. They'd agreed to try online therapy together, a real commitment, not just a gesture, and Danielle had made clear this was a beginning, not an ending, a chance, not a guarantee, but it was something, and after everything, something felt enormous. As for Jonathan, the divorce moved forward. Once Danielle had finally said all the things she'd been swallowing for months, something shifted. He stopped dragging his feet on the negotiations. Maybe he finally understood the weight of what he'd done. Maybe he just wanted it over. Either way, the process moved faster after that restaurant conversation than it had in all the weeks before. And the house, Danielle's house, her house, the one she'd wanted for years and finally let herself have, was starting to feel like a home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was hers, built on a decision she made for herself for the first time in a very long time. Some people called it petty, some called it cruel. Some said she punished her daughter unfairly. And maybe there's some truth in all of that, but here's the other truth. Sometimes the most painful lessons are the ones that actually stick. Mia learned something that no college course could have taught her, that the people who love you most are not an infinite resource, that loyalty has to be chosen consciously and consistently, that you can lose someone even while they're still standing in front of you if you take them for granted long enough. And Danielle learned something too, that advocating for yourself, loudly, imperfectly, even in ways that make people uncomfortable, is not the same as being a bad person. That you can love someone deeply and still refuse to be treated like you don't matter. That love and self respect are not opposites. They never were. So here we are. Take a breath because that was a lot. And if you've made it this far, you already know this story wasn't really about a college fund or a house or even an Instagram post with a heart emoji. It was about something much older and much harder than any of that. It was about what happens when the people who are supposed to show up for you don't, and what you do with yourself in the aftermath. Let's be honest with each other for a second. When Danielle spent that college fund, a lot of people's first instinct was probably to gasp, maybe even to judge, because we have this deeply ingrained idea that mothers are supposed to be endlessly selfless, that a good mother absorbs pain quietly, keeps giving no matter what, and never lets her own hurt bleed into her decisions about her children. But can we talk about how unfair that standard actually is? Danielle didn't wake up one morning and decide to blow up her daughter's future out of spite. She got there after months of being shut out, dismissed, blocked, and replaced by her husband and her child while she was already at her lowest point. She begged for connection. She reached out again and again. She showed up even when it cost her. And every single time, she was met with indifference or cruelty. At some point, a person has to stop absorbing. Not because they've stopped loving, but because self destruction is not the same as devotion. Was spending the college fund the right move? That depends on what you mean by right. Was it legally hers to spend? Yes. Was it emotionally motivated? Absolutely. Did it cause real consequences for her daughter? No question. But did it also shake something loose, force a kind of reckoning that months of gentle reaching out had completely failed to produce? Yes, undeniably yes. Sometimes people only look up when the ground shifts beneath them. And Mia, smart, young, deeply flawed, deeply human Mia, finally looked up. Now, here's what sits with me about this whole story. Mia's confession, the one in that handwritten letter, was gutting in a way that's almost hard to articulate. Because it wasn't a story about a teenager who hated her mother or genuinely preferred Alicia. It was a story about a teenager who made a transaction, who weighed a car and an apartment against her mother's pain and chose the material things, and then buried the guilt under distance and silence because she didn't know how to face what she'd done. That's not a monster. That's a kid who made a terrible, selfish choice and then didn't have the emotional tools to deal with the fallout, which doesn't make it okay, but it makes it human, painfully, recognizably human. And Danielle, this woman who had every reason to stay closed off, to protect herself, to decide that the wound was too deep and the bridge too burned, chose to show up anyway. Not because she'd forgotten what happened, not because she was pretending it was fine, but because she looked at the cost of staying away and decided it was higher than the cost of trying to heal. That's not weakness. That's one of the hardest things a person can do. I want to ask you something directly, and I genuinely want you to think about it. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely invisible to someone you loved? Where you kept reaching out, kept trying, kept making yourself available, and kept getting nothing back? And at some point, you had to make a decision. Do I keep going, or do I finally do something for myself? Because that moment, that specific, excruciating moment, is what this entire story is really about. It's not about money, it's about a woman finally deciding that her needs were real and valid and worth honoring, even if the timing was messy, even if the method was controversial, even if it made people uncomfortable. She stopped performing selflessness and she started actually living. Here's what I keep coming back to at the end of all this: Danielle and Mia are going to be okay. Not immediately, not perfectly, but they're doing the work: therapy, honest conversations, showing up for each other in small ways while they figure out the big ones. That's more than a lot of families manage after this kind of rupture. And it started with a letter, a messy, heartfelt, deeply imperfect letter from a daughter who finally stopped running from what she'd done. Jonathan and Alicia, they have their version of this story and they're welcome to it. But the two people whose relationship actually matters, the mother and the daughter, are finding their way back to each other, slowly, carefully, on their own terms. And Danielle has her house, the one she drove past for years while putting everyone else first. The one with the good neighborhood and the afternoon light and the floorboards that creak in all the right places. She gets to wake up there every single morning and be reminded that she chose herself, imperfectly, controversially, but genuinely, and that the world didn't end. In fact, something new began. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. So, what do you think? Did Danielle go too far or not far enough? Was spending that college fund an act of self preservation or an act of punishment? And when someone you love refuses to see your pain, at what point do you stop trying to make them understand and just start living for yourself? There's no clean answer. There never is with the messy, complicated, deeply human stuff. But that's exactly why these stories matter, because they hold up a mirror and make us ask ourselves the questions we usually avoid. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you land on this one, because I have a feeling this story is going to divide people right down the middle. And honestly, that's the most interesting place to have a conversation. And if this story hit you somewhere real, if you've ever been Danielle, or if you've ever, in your more honest moments, been Mia, then share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, a story about someone else's life is the exact thing that helps us make sense of our own. Subscribe if you're not already here because we do this every week. Real stories, real people, real emotions, no filters. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one. And if you made it all the way to the end of this one, leave a like. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and these stories deserve to be found. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And maybe, just maybe, take care of the people you love before they stop waiting for you to notice them. See you in the next one.